I can tell you, I've luminoled the house. I've done other testing at the house, and there's nothing there that I would say it looks like this is a crime scene, a violent crime scene. But I can tell you, I have seen that document. It is legit, and it did say murder.
As David is constantly in the news, especially now that it's being reported that he may likely be indicted in connection with the death of a teenage girl apparently found in the trunk of a car registered in his name, we are bringing back somebody who's been looking into this case for quite some time. Somebody who has been on the ground in LA. Someone who has been making news regarding his findings. We're talking about private investigator Steve Fischer. Not only will Steve tell us what he has learned since the last time we spoke to him, but he may have now found the last known photo of this deceased girl, Celeste Rivas Hernandez. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Okay, before we get into this, it is the new year, and when you think about it, it's taking time to reflect, relax, refresh. For me, starting fresh begins at home, which is why I need to tell you about our sponsor, Cozy Earth. So whether it's loungewear, towels, bedding, they're high-quality products. They are go-to every time. Every time you feel like you need a reset, you need to relax, this is what you got to go to. By the way, their Baja bedding set, not only does the fabric feel built to last a lifetime, but the design is pretty stunning. I will say their luxury bath towels feel like a resort. Who doesn't want that? Cozy Earth has a 100-night sleep trial, so there's no risk if you don't love them. You start the new year off right. You give your home the luxury it deserves. So head on over to CozyEarth.com and use code Law&Crime for up to 20% off. Hope you can check it out. All right, so it's time once again in our David coverage to bring on a key figure in this investigation, somebody we haven't had on for quite some time, the private investigator, the PI, Steve Fischer, who was hired by the owner of that property that the romantic homicide singer was apparently staying at in the Hollywood Hills, this property that was reportedly near where the Tesla was found with 14-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez's body inside. That car was allegedly registered to David, who, by the way, has not been arrested. He has not been charged at the time of this recording. He's not been officially implicated. But, as we last reported, there is apparently a grand jury that has been hearing evidence out in LA, and according to TMZ, now it is being reported that David will likely face murder charges. That this grand jury may be handing down an indictment, despite previous reporting that the alleged grand jury hearing the evidence was a different kind of grand jury, one that can't formally charge. So now it is possible things may have changed. And we don't know for sure if there's a grand jury. We don't know for sure if they would come down with charges against David or anybody else. And we don't know for sure what those charges would be. So we're just basing it on the reporting. Now, I will note, it has also been reported that the grand jury may be hearing evidence into next month as well, so February. So maybe, if all of this is true, we won't even see an indictment just yet. But look, as we are on the lookout to see if David or anyone else is arrested or charged in connection with Celeste's death, I do want to talk to Steve Fischer. I want to talk to him about the latest developments. There's a lot, including when he posted something about a 55-pound burn cage being delivered to that property that David was seemingly staying at, that a chainsaw was found. But Steve also may have the last known photograph of Celeste. Remember, she was reported missing from her home in Lake Elsinore on April 5th, 2024. This is when she was just 13 years old. However, there has been footage released of her seemingly arguing with her family's neighbors on September 8th, 2024. So the timeline has always been interesting. It's always been important. It has been confusing, especially since it's believed that Celeste was in the trunk of that Tesla for quite some time. A couple months ago, that LAPD came out with a statement that said in part, quote, the vehicle had been parked at the location from which it was towed for several weeks, so Miss Rivas Hernandez may have been deceased for several weeks before the discovery of her body. Now, to be clear, the cause and manner of death for Celeste and the records related to her from the ME's office, the medical examiner's office, they are currently sealed, and this is due to a court order that was initiated by the LAPD. Okay, so with all that in mind, time to bring back on Steve Fischer. Steve, really good to see you. It's been a minute since we've had you on. A lot has been happening. So first of all, where are you in your investigation? I mean, since the last time we spoke, what is there anything new you can tell us? I mean, where are you right now in your personal investigation?
So we continue to investigate it and talk to new people. Just as of yesterday, we We're contacted by somebody that's actually ends up being very close to David and had a relationship with him around that time. So we're continuing to get new information, to learn more about, those events and who was around at that time and who was living at the house and not living at the house. So it continues. More people keep popping up that weren't even on our radar.
And just to be clear, whatever information you're gathering, is that something that you're sharing with law enforcement, with the DA's office? Is there anything you can tell us about what information you're sharing with them as we're trying to understand what's happening behind closed doors?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anything that we determine is not just noise. I mean, obviously get a lot of, people calling, with information that's not relevant, theories or remote viewers and stuff. But the people that are tied, we pass that right along to authorities, to their investigators. They don't tell us the outcome of what they follow up or not, but we do absolutely make them aware, because this is not about collecting information and getting it out to the public first or not getting it or keeping it private. It's about justice for Celeste in the end, right? So right. We are definitely giving all the information to authorities.
Do you have any further insight into where David is right now?
I don't. I could just speculate. I know that not long after they canceled the tour and this whole thing came crashing down, I believe he was in the LA area, because when he transferred those homes in Texas into a trust, those were notarized by an LA notary. So at the time, it appears he was in LA, but whether he's in Texas or LA or who knows where, I would think that LAPD probably has a good idea, but I don't have any idea. And I'm shocked. One of the biggest things in this whole case, I'm just amazed that he's kept such a low profile and had that restraint to not make any public statements or lash out online.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything from him. I haven't heard anything from his reported attorney, Blair Burke, regarding any of this. Before I get into this photo of Celeste, which I think is really important, when you hear TMZ reporting that a grand jury has been assembled and they're now saying that it is likely that he could be charged with murder, based on your investigation, would you say, that doesn't seem likely? Or do you say, and I know you might be limited in what you can reveal to us, but when you hear something like that, do you say they seem far off, they might be on the right track, I can't talk about it? Because that was a very big headline. Sure.
So as far as murder goes itself, as a subset of homicide, right? I do think it's likely, and here's why. It has nothing to do with if there may be grand juries or not. When that rumor first broke, which I believe was from the LA Times, it was from a document that was filed to seal the medical examiner's records that was filed with the LA courts. There was a short window of time that filing itself was released by the clerk's office. And I'll tell you, I've seen the original document, and in the motion, it uses the word murder. So, and that was a public document at the time. Now I know it's been sealed, but it didn't say homicide investigation. It actually said murder. So just based off that, not anything I have found. I can tell you, I've luminoled the house. I've done other testing at the house, and there's nothing there that I would say it looks like this is a crime scene, a violent crime scene. But I can tell you, I have seen that document. It is legit, and it did say murder.
Yeah, so just assuming that for a moment, right? Mm-hmm. What changed? The LAPD came out at one point, I think it was like 2 months ago, and said there might not be anything beyond concealment of a body. Any idea what may have changed to suggest that Celeste was killed?
The only thing I think about this a lot too. The only thing I can think of is that somebody flipped it, because if they had all of a sudden run across some sort of biological evidence or some crime scene, I think the charges would have dropped pretty quick. But you're right. They went from, hey, there might not be any culpability beyond concealment of a body, which is a misdemeanor, to all of a sudden, not just homicide, but murder. And so something changed there. And I think they would have already charged if they had a murder weapon or a scene or whatever. So I think it's got to be based on somebody's cooperating, somebody cut a deal.
And not just the findings from the ME's office, which we don't know what they are.
Yeah, we don't know what they are because they sealed those. I do think that I know most people speculate that it's undetermined. I personally, and I don't have any inside information on this, I do believe that they were able to make a determination. I know her remains were in very bad shape, but if you go back to the death certificate said that, she wasn't pregnant. Well, that means they were able to get that hormone test, or they were able to inspect the internal organs enough to determine that. So the fact that they were able to get that means I think they were able to get a good toxicology test. So I do think that they probably made a determination. And once they made that determination is when LAPD went in and got those petition to get that sealed on the 21st, I think it was.
Yeah. So again, just trying to understand what that change might have been. Okay. So I'll go back to that in a second. I have to talk about this new photo of Celeste that you apparently found. So talk to us about what this photo is, where you discovered it, and when was it taken? Do you know?
Yeah, so it was taken January 2nd of 2025. It was on a SD card, a memory card that goes into a camera that was after they moved out of the house that was left behind. And it had, I think, about 1,100 photos on it. Various things, only a handful that included Celeste. And this was the last that we had previously released one that was, I think, on the 30th of December of her downtown. Presumably he took the picture. This is a photo, the Baldwin Hills Scenic Overlook, which is kind of a hiking area in Culver City, kind of in the heart of Los Angeles. And it's about 5:05 p.m., January 2nd. And it's a profile photo of her. To me, it's just very sad. She looks lost. She looks like a runaway to me, and like a confused runaway. And I don't know, it just breaks my heart to look at that picture. But I do think it's important for the public to see it too, that she was alive and she's a real person. And we're talking about somebody that really deserves justice.
100%. Do you know who took the photo?
I assume it's by David, simply because it's his camera. And then there's pictures later that evening where he's taking them into a mirror and you can see that he's holding the camera and whatnot. So I assume it's him, but then I will say that there's a couple pictures immediately after that one of her on the camera of him. So I think that they were together, and just like they were on the 30th in downtown, I think they had these little excursions and took a lot of photos in hiking type of situations or out in the kind of foresty area. So
how does that factor into the timeline about what might have happened to her? I mean, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, because, originally we reported, right, she had disappeared in 2024, and then there was this sighting of her with the neighbors. So how does this affect the timeline of understanding when she died?
Yeah, so originally people were thinking, well, maybe she died a week or so before she was found. And I originally had said, I think she was in there for months. And now I know LAPD saying they think possibly springtime, it sounds like, reading between the lines. I think it could be as early as January. And I'm not saying that day on January 2nd, but a couple things happened on the timeline there. So we got January 2nd, the photos of her stop, and his behavior taking photos and whatnot kind of drastically changes around that time too. But then also the black Tesla that she's in, stops really being used and showing up. It used to show up in a lot of Instagram reels and photos and whatnot. And then it's being parked in different areas around the neighborhood. And not too long ago, I spoke with an estate manager from a house in the area, and they told me that they were talking about this smell. And this is the first I had heard from them. And she's like, we had a dog, one of the dogs died, and they buried it in the backyard. And it's a very large, backyard, but the Tesla would park in the area. And they said anytime we get over about 70 degrees or so, the backyard would get this horrible smell. And they thought that they had not buried the dog deep enough. And they were getting ready to unearth this dog and rebury it. But then the Tesla disappeared. And when I asked when this dog died, it was in February. And she said it was a very distinct, death smell. Now, once the Tesla disappeared in June, it got moved up to Bluebird, all of a sudden the smell went away. So I do think, January, then that happening in February, I do think, January to March is probably a sweet spot where something could have happened. And also they leased a new Tesla on February 1st.
Oh, that's interesting too. I didn't know that. What about yeah, if you can expand.
When the search warrant was served, we all of a sudden, we saw on the news, there was a red Tesla being pulled out of the garage, and ran the DMV on it, and it comes back to Rob Morganrath, his manager, and it was leased on February 1st. So all of a sudden, January, the Tesla stops being used for some reason. February, there's a new Tesla. This horrible smell starts originating after, February. So you got to wonder.
Right. And by the way, I should also let everybody know, if you haven't been following our coverage, Morgenroth allegedly testified in front of this grand jury as well, and allegedly said something in the hallways, being questioned by the prosecutor about, why he didn't notify more about what was going on. Let me ask you this. There's this conversation about, and LAPD seemed to confirm that David took this trip to Santa Barbara, right? So how would that factor into your timeline?
I can't figure out what the purpose of that trip would be, to be honest with you. I don't know if they went there to do something to her, or to started deceased and put her in some other form. Why bring her back again? Now, I will say that there's a lot of photos on this camera in the national forest, but not in Santa Barbara, not terribly far from there, within 75 miles or so. But I don't know. The Santa Barbara thing is really confusing me. There seemed to be this total confusion of what to do with her, I guess, if they're making trips and then chickening out. And this is what baffles me of why there hasn't been an arrest yet, because if they're that sloppy, they leave this girl in a Tesla in a neighborhood, they can't figure out how to get rid of her, then how do they not have the evidence yet to be able to drop some charges? Because it's so sloppy. It seems like there's got to be a ton of other evidence, because I know there's video stuff out there. Well,
you went public and mentioned the idea of this 55-pound burn cage being delivered to that property that David was apparently staying at, that there was a chainsaw that was recovered. Now, to be clear, and correct me if I'm wrong, right, no evidence that those were used, but you would seem to suggest, hey, this goes to state of mind, this goes to planning, right? So you're talking about, one theory would be there was an effort to potentially dispose of her body, and maybe the car was towed before it could actually be used, right? I mean, that made news in the past few weeks.
I think that's, I believe that that's what happened. It's only my theory, but I believe that this was like one of the ideas. And I'm talking plural. I think there's multiple people involved, at least trying to dispose of her part of it. And I think one of the plans might have been, okay, what about if we cremate her? What if we do this? And so they ordered these things, and it was at least an option available to them, which they didn't put in motion. And then I do think that they probably got cold feet, were afraid, where do we do it? Who does it? Like, should we just pay somebody to do it? How can we just get rid of the Tesla altogether, put it in a lake? And none of those plans, then all of a sudden it gets towed. And it's like, now what? But why they would leave the Tesla where they left it is mind-boggling.
I have to ask about this grand jury. Now, let's be clear about something. You may be very limited in what you can say. So anything you can't say, completely understand, but I have to ask. Can you confirm in any way whether you believe a grand jury, and maybe more specifically a grand jury that can return an indictment, is being impaneled right now and is hearing evidence?
That part, I did release some things on Twitter, because I got a handwritten notice to appear for a notice, or for order to show cause on a contempt charge. And I put in that tweet that I had in the past appeared a couple times from a grand jury. I'm not saying it's a grand jury for this case or whatever case, but I was given this handwritten notice to show up. I was given it on a Friday and told to show up on a Tuesday. And I wasn't told what the charge, I wasn't the exact, of what I was being accused of. So how could I hire representation? How could I defend myself? And I also said, listen, I flew in for this, I'll just say a meeting, right? And where I was given this piece of paper, I flew in from Georgia, where I was on a search and rescue mission, and they knew I was flying out that evening. And I said, I can't, Tuesday, and you weren't even telling me what it's about. And there was no public docket about it. There was nothing. It was all very secretive, and it really worried me. And that's why I came out with it publicly, because I felt like people needed to know. It's the only protection I had, about this secret hearing going on. And I didn't show up for it. I still don't know to this day what happened in that hearing. I know that a hearing did apparently take place. I was told by somebody that was at the courthouse, but I don't know if there's a warrant for me. I have no idea.
So you can't say at this point in time whether you've been held in contempt of court, and for what reason, right? That you can't say.
It's not even that I can't say. I don't know, because if I call the courthouse, there's no case number. I can't even check anything. Yeah. So it's they're very well. A hearing did take place. So I'll just be honest. There was a reporter after I tweeted that. There was a reporter that showed up for the hearing. They want to know what was going on. And they pushed it from the morning to the afternoon docket. And it was after the docketed cases. And then they were told to leave the courtroom. And so I don't know. And I can't call and find out because I don't have a case number. So I have no idea.
Also can't confirm this, but this is based on TMZ's reporting. They're saying that if there's a grand jury, that it's being spearheaded by career homicide prosecutor Beth Silverman. Now, for people who don't know, is she a big deal out in LA? I mean, what should we know about her as far as you know?
She is a big deal. She's the one who prosecutes most of the death penalty cases, the high profile cases, and she is fierce and aggressive. And so it's the exact type of prosecutor you want to have in a case like this. It's also a really scary person to have in a situation like mine, where there's a potential secret contempt hearing going on, and that person may be spearheading as well. So this is what worries me, and that's why I want the press and everybody to know about it, because I don't think it should happen that way. But as far as David goes, if indeed he's indicted and she is the prosecutor on it, like she doesn't lose, and she takes on tough cases and cold cases, and she gets convictions.
Based on what you've seen, assuming for a moment there is a grand jury that's been impaneled and hearing evidence, and assuming it's a grand jury that can return an indictment, would you say we could maybe expect that multiple people would be indicted at the same time, that it's not just one person, that if you're talking about several people allegedly involved in what happened to Celeste, is that something we may expect?
Yes, and this isn't based on anything that I may or may not know about a grand jury or anything, but based on what I've seen evidence-wise, I'd be shocked if it's not multiple people. And I do think it'll all drop at one time. I don't think it'd be just like, one person and then start going after the others. I think they're going to wrap them all up at one time. I do think there's going to be one or two people that have really direct knowledge that are going to get immunity, and unfortunately are going to not really pay a price for this. But I think that's the only way that they're going to get the main people.
And if an indictment or indictments drop, do you think that's when the Emmys findings and the cause and manner of death with respect to Celeste will be unsealed, and we and maybe Celeste's family will finally know what happened?
I don't think so. I think they're going to hold it tight. I think one of the reasons I know why they use investigative juries, grand juries, obviously, but also it's to avoid a prelim hearing where you have to kind of show that discovery and that evidence. And by past dealings and knowing conversations I've had with people involved on the prosecution side and the secrecy wanted, I think they're going to, until they absolutely have to disclose anything, I don't think they're going to, I think they're going to be very minimal on that. I do think the ME's office wants to put the information out, but they're,
For sure. They came out quite strongly about this court order and said it's so unusual. And there seems to be this battle between the ME's office and the LAPD. I mean, by the way, we reported about this, but there was mixed reporting. LAPD came out and said, despite the reporting that you're hearing about Celeste's body being frozen and her being decapitated, we are denying that. I mean, by the way, can you shed any light on that discrepancy?
Well, I thought that was a completely ridiculous thing from the start. I knew that was right. But also, they came out with a statement saying that the purpose of getting the record sealed was not, to avoid transparency, but it was to make sure that detectives got the information before the public did. Okay, detectives now have that information, you got to believe. So why not now go ahead? If it's not a transparency thing, why not release it now? I just don't think they will. And I understand that they have their controls and whatnot, but if charges drop, this is, the people, the state of California versus, we all, this is something that we do have a right to know something about, and especially, and we should know if this person's still on the loose and they're a threat, or it could be a threat, we need to know about these things. I think some information, even a press conference, would be, well advised.
Before we wrap things up, before I let you go, I want to take it back to Celeste. You've been looking into this case for quite some time. What did you learn about Celeste Rivas Hernandez? What would you like the viewers to know about her and what her life was like, her short life? And B, have you had the opportunity to speak to her family or her friends? How are they doing at this point? So, if you could shed some light on that, that'd be really great.
I have talked to a couple people that were close to Celeste, not direct family members, but people that were very close. And in fact, some of the people that were involved in helping to find her first couple times she ran away. Celeste obviously was somewhat troubled, but I mean, the huge percentage of teenagers her age growing up, especially in these times, of course you get that. I'll tell you why I haven't reached out to her family, because I do want to be respectful of them. I know that they're mourning and whatnot. However, Celeste was not a true missing person. There was a missing persons report filed since 24, but she had appeared at home multiple times in between that time, and they knew where she was staying in Los Angeles, and I have hard proof of that. I have text messages from family members. And what they were doing was they didn't want a CPS investigation into her not going to school, so they left this report open. And I'm not blaming them, for what happened to her. But if they were having a problem controlling her, then there are systems in place through the school and the counseling system and whatnot that can help and assist. But I don't want to talk to them because I feel like I have to ask those questions, like, why did you allow this? And I think that would be kind of like, victim blaming. But, listen, there was a lot of failures along the way here. And David was kind of like green lighted, even by his managers. And, a lot of people knew, his friends knew she was underage, and they allowed this to happen. And then look where we're at, and even now, who knows how many of those people are even talking? Are they still protecting David? I mean, it's crazy how nobody's come out and told the story yet.
Steve Fischer, thanks so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. You can follow me on X or Instagram. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.